All right, I'm Adam, and I'm talking to Liam Finn. You have two solo albums out now, and there was 4 years roughly in between the two.
Yep.
But you were busy. You were touring. You released an EP. You were involved with the Seven Worlds Collide project. Do you plan out these things? Like you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and then you're going to record, or do you just take opportunities kind of as they come?
I definitely spent 4 years of taking opportunities. Yeah, it was once I made I'll Be Lightning and started touring that, and people seemed to like it. It opened up a lot of doors, and it seemed like it was a new album for 4 years, because every time I sort of finished touring one country, it got released in another country, and it was a new record to them, and so things kept on coming up, and me and EJ, who she was my band. We were just having such a good time, and the shows were all just building and building and building that we kind of didn't want to say no. We had to learn how to say no eventually, and I had to sort of force myself to go back to New Zealand to recharge the batteries and make a new record. But yeah, it was an amazing time, and we kind of lived like nomads for 4 years and didn't have a home. It was good, no rent.
How much did your experience during those 4 years influence the new album?
I think a lot. I mean, in some ways, what influenced this new record was probably more of coming home and the shock to the system that was. And, you know, New Zealand's a beautiful place, and I was living in a little beach batch that we call them, a little beach house, I suppose, in a place that I kind of grew up called Piha, which is probably my favourite. It's the most beautiful, most wild and rocky and black sand kind of crazy beach in the world, and it's definitely where I, feel the most comfortable and happy. So I sort of thought that moving back to New Zealand would be really good for, getting the energy back and writing a new record. But in some ways I think I freaked out, just from not having that routine and not having, the adrenaline rush of performing every night and constantly meeting people and moving around. It was definitely quite a stimulating lifestyle. So I think it was the response to that, and feeling strange about it was probably what wrote a lot of the record, or at least influenced a lot of the atmosphere of it, yeah.
See, I was going to ask, has it gotten easier releasing solo albums, just being in control of everything yourself, or is it just different each time?
It's definitely, compared to the experience I've had with my old band, and even, with making records with my friends, and we've got a band called Barb, and those sort of things are a lot more, you share the weight of the expectation, which is kind of in a way the most daunting thing. When it's a solo record, it's just you, and it's a statement in a way, and especially for me, I feel very connected to the songs I write, and feel like they're very bearing and honest. And so in some ways, when you're about to release a solo record, you're kind of absolutely petrified that someone's going to think you're a tool, because but not so much that, but like I guess it's self-imposed pressure that you want it to be really good and the best thing you've ever done, and sometimes trying to sit down and write the best song you can that you've ever written is not really conducive to writing a song at all. So it took me a long time to figure out what it was that turned me on about making music again, and what I wanted to do with this new record to make it feel fresh and inspired,
Well, you weren't totally alone with this one, though. You had a producer.
Yeah, well, that was the mission, was to find that like the extra part of the equation, which ended up being Burke Reed, who is Canadian actually.
Yeah, there's a connection.
Yeah.
What influence would you say he had on the final product?
Well, it was a huge collaboration. It was very much from the songs that I presented him to the ones that he did and didn't like. Like that was a kind of a big thing at the beginning. Was I think I had an idea of what I was making, and he had an idea of what he liked about what I did and what he thought could be different, and was very, honest and verbal about it. So at first it was kind of figuring out what kind of record we were going to make and what songs to cull and which ones to, to work on. And in some ways, a lot of the stuff that's my favourite stuff now came out of, just starting on a noise or an atmosphere or even a beat or something that wasn't always the way I wrote songs in the past. And he really pushed me to just do things a different way, but ultimately it still feels like a Liam Finn record. But even hearing it back each night, I was getting surprised at what it was sounding like. So I think that was the key factor in feeling inspired, was just having someone else's ears and hearing it back differently. That was exciting.
So was it difficult to relinquish control, if you would say you did?
I think we kind of had our areas we were in control of, and it was nice to, compared to the last record that I made, which was I did everything on my own and engineered it and stuff.
Yeah.
It was nice to not have to worry about that stuff, and also nice to that was where it sounded different to me, because I would do I'm not very skilled, but I have a certain way of doing things. So if I did it on my own, I would hear it back and it would sound like the last record or something, and
Okay.
I didn't want to compete with that one. I like that as what it is, and but yeah, I think it was kind of strange to have someone else's opinion, you know. But ultimately, I ended up taking a lot of comfort in the fact that I didn't have to make every decision. And sometimes you can, when you're feeling low in energy and end up hitting a brick wall, you know, there's someone else there to pick you back up and go, oh, how about this? And then that gets your juices flowing again. So I think ultimately it was probably a lot of a quicker process than it would have been if I'd done it all on my own.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I should say the name of the album. How do I say it? FOMO?
FOMO.
Oh, you actually say FOMO.
Yeah.
And that stands for?
Fear of missing out.
Can you explain that? Where the origin?
Well, FOMO being an acronym was just something that kind of like became a bit of a tongue-in-cheek term we used amongst my friends and family, especially because I'd moved back to New Zealand after, you know, well, I was living in England before that, but then living nowhere, touring and stuff, and a lot of my friends are still living over in England, and my family had all kind of gone away, and so I was feeling quite FOMO about what they were doing, and I was on my own back in New Zealand. But I think it's a bit of a general headspace of the planet these days. You know, there's sort of with social networking, and you know, Twitter and Facebook are kind of constantly reminding you of what you're missing out on, or people are, you know, not always boastfully, but kind of uploading photos of last night's awesome party that you weren't at, but I'm going to tag you in it anyway, just so you know it was awesome. You know, we're just generating this perpetual FOMO.
Like, why would you do anything if you can't tell people about it?
Maybe.
Sort of idea?
Yeah, I think that everyone likes to feel important, but I think through these, because there's so much information out there now, you can get this overwhelming anxiety that you can't do everything, and you know, sometimes knowing about what you're missing out on is a lot worse than just missing out on it because you didn't know, you know, and so I just got fascinated with the term, and also just enjoyed using it to tell myself to harden up, you know, when I was in this really beautiful beach going, oh, I miss my friends, and you know, stop being such a FOMO, harden up.
Okay. Is there a theme of the album, or is that the theme? Because it's a pretty eclectic sounding album, I think.
Yeah.
So
it is.
Is there something that kind of ties it all together, do you think?
Well, I think the atmosphere of the record is the thing that from the very beginning was the only thing I was kind of clear on was what kind of atmosphere I wanted to create. And the first track on the record was one of the first songs I wrote for the record, and that we used most of the demo of it because it just had that atmosphere that felt right, felt like the beach I was living at, and it felt like, you know, the feeling I had. And so I guess FOMO loosely kind of, you know, does sum up the year I had in New Zealand, but I guess it's kind of a tragic term because it's not really a, you know, it's kind of like when you're feeling sorry for yourself, but there's nothing wrong, you know, and I think that that's a pretty normal headspace, but it's not particularly glamorous. It's not, you shouldn't feel like that. But no, I guess the theme of the record was just this, this idea of I'm kind of in a completely different place, you know, emotionally and physically, and you know, got a longer beard than I did when I made the last one, and you know, so I think that what the record represents is just purely, you know, it's especially in hindsight feels very true and very almost autobiographical in that sense, but not really. It's not so direct that you couldn't tell what I had for breakfast on June 3rd last year, but definitely how it sums up the anxiety of the beginning of the year, and then the joyous nature of the end of finishing the record and getting excited about touring again and doing all that side of it. And the last couple of songs definitely end on a, you know, joyous sort of feeling.
For sure. Jump Your Bones specifically, that one really jumped out at me when I first heard it. It sounds triumphant.
Cool.
Interesting.
That's what, yeah.
I could be way off.
That's why I like.
You were thinking.
No. That's what I mean. It kind of feels like that to me as well. That's probably my favourite song on the record, and
really?
And like the first song on the record was the first thing I did. That was probably the last thing I finished off for the record, and it did feel somewhat triumphant to finally have this record done, because it was a really challenging record to make because there was so many choices of what it could do, and I knew that I'd be out touring it for another year or two, so I wanted to really believe it and be excited about it. And that song kind of we've just actually made a video for it, which I'm really excited about as well, which is kind of this super slow-mo drumming video that you kind of see in between the moments that you can kind of see when someone's actually smacking the drums, because it's like 250 frames per second, so you can make 3 seconds last a minute and a half or something like crazy.
Cool.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Speaking of all the choices you made with the album, there's a lot going on for a solo record. I mean, there are 5 things going on at once. Some sounds come in for like 2 seconds at a time. Did you build each song piece by piece, or did you have a sort of vision for completed songs before you started tracking?
We kind of went piece by piece, but to be honest, it was, you know, it's funny because there is a lot going on, but we also, in some ways, tried to take the simplest route for everything we did. And you know, as far as not messing with the song if it didn't need to be messed with, you know, there's a few kind of more straightforward things than were on my last record, and in some ways, it's got more of a pop kind of thing about it, which was, you know, a conscious thing that, in some ways, I feel like pop music of today, and there's a lot of terrible stuff out there, but every 1 in 10 of these pop hits that are out there are actually some of the most experimental and forward thinking of any music out there. You know, I'm kind of a bit bored by indie rock, and you know, a lot of that stuff is quite now feels quite generic and sort of paint by numbers as to how to make an indie rock kind of sound. So I was kind of more interested in some of the aesthetics of pop music, and you know, keeping things relatively simple, or if they are tricky or challenging, the listener doesn't really know they've been challenged until they have accepted it and swallowed it, you know.
Oh, so I mean, you grab them and then it's only after repeated listens that people might notice, like, oh, this is what's going on. Maybe
I suppose so.
Why they like it.
Yeah, I mean,
possibly?
that was the idea going into it, but I, you know, ultimately, yeah, like I think some people would hear it and go, oh, it's quite complex, and yet some people listen to it and get it straight away. So I don't know, it's such a subjective thing, you know, what pop music does, the effect that it has on people. So
Right.
yeah, I guess I just want to always make records that feel like it's your first record again. That's kind of my philosophy. It'd be amazing to make first records forever, because it's the only time you're ever free to, you know, no preconceptions, or no one's got any kind of, oh, this is the pigeonhole we put Liam Finn into. And in some ways I really wanted to make something that was completely different to the last one and was a bit more representational of the live show, which is a lot more energetic and wild and spontaneous. And
Right.
yeah.
Well, speaking of the live show, I need to ask you, this is your first time touring with a full band as opposed to layering, doing all the loops. Is that right?
Yeah, well, yeah, we did a tour earlier in the year, but this is sort of one continuous tour, it feels like. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, for this, what made you decide not to do everything yourself? Really?
I think what made the one-man band thing really exciting was the fact that every night was completely different, and it was so fresh to me that I was always on the edge of my seat and always on the edge of complete disaster, which I think
Really?
was a good... Well, you know, I had it under control. In some ways, that's the thing that's captivating, is the more dangerous it kind of feels like it's getting, or the more it could fall apart, the more an audience is kind of with you, hanging on there. And so when something does go wrong, it's your mission to cover it up by making it sound right, and trying to, you know, you step outside yourself to try and fix things. And it's, in some ways, I think that was what was, you know, drew people in and what got me a lot of notice. But over 3 or 4 years of doing it, I kind of got more and more comfortable in that spontaneity that was, it was still there. It just wasn't quite as exciting to me anymore. And the idea of having untamable musicians and people I can't control and things I can't control felt exciting. And also to hear the old songs with, you know, full band again just gave them a new life and made them feel really exciting. So, you know, it made it feel, you know, not so daunting to go out and play every night for a year.
Oh, so it's always fresh to you.
Yeah, that's
your
what
own
I'd like
ears.
to keep it, you know, keep it changing. So, because I think if I'm bored, then it's not going to be good to watch, you know, if I'm too comfortable.
Any plans to record with the band, or have you thought about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, now we've been, you know, touring for about 8 months with this band, and I think that would be a shame to kind of not, you know, make the most of the flow we've gotten into. But yeah, I've got my brother playing drums, which is really awesome, but I've still got my drum kit out there, so we end up, half the show ends up being this kind of brutal double drums and fuzz bass jams. So yeah, the next record will be definitely more of a band effort, and I think that'll be a way to make it feel like a first record again, is, you know, to feel part of a band and you know, write the songs all together. And we've moved over to the States. We're living in New York now, so I'm sure that'll have an influence. And
That's right.
yeah.
So with each record, there's something new. You added a producer. Next, you might add the band.
Yeah.
And then it could be a huge orchestra. Or,
Why not?
I guess it's
Well, you know, to be honest, I feel like I seem to kind of perversely just go against everything I learn, you know, and going the analog way with my first record and do everything myself, kind of fought against that and made this completely on Pro Tools and sort of embraced the digital age, and something that I was quite anti for a long time. So yeah, I think whatever I like right now, I could write you a list of things I like. About in 3 years' time, you can guarantee that I'm going to hate it all. And then I'm going to be like, I'm just going to be liking piano classical music or something.
Well, I guess, I mean, obviously your music evolves as your own tastes evolve, or
Yeah.
change, I should say, right?
I guess that's probably why it's a pretty eclectic sounding record. I mean, I've always been into a lot of different music, but also each song feels like it's got to be its own beast, you know? You can't sort of, that's the great thing about a band, is that, you know, the sort of match of personalities will always sound kind of a certain way, no matter how much they try and make a different kind of record. There's a thing that ties it together by being a band, but being a solo artist, I think it would be a shame to kind of get stuck being this one type of solo artist, because in some ways that's really embarrassing to me. And the solo artists I like are the ones that kind of kept things changing and challenging themselves, and people like Beck, you know, is always changing, or David Bowie was always changing, and Neil Young was always kind of pushing himself to do different things and fighting against stuff. So I think that's what makes interesting artists, you know, as far as solo goes, you know.
Makes sense to me. I'm going to ask you one more question, and feel free to storm out of the interview if you don't want to answer it. Are there any annoying side effects of having a father who is a famous musician, other than questions like this?
I'm sure there are, but I mean, there's annoying side effects to, I think, anyone's career. There's always one question that everyone gets asked. You know, you talk to any band or musician, that whether it be where'd the name come from, or whether, you know, all that kind of stuff. But
Right.
but no, I mean, I guess I'm lucky that I really love my father's music, and it's something that I'm really proud of, and I'm happy to be part of. I've been, you know, lucky to be part of it growing up, and you know, and he's a big part of my music, and so yeah, it's something that I've never shied away from talking about, and certainly never wanted to see it, or at least indulge myself to think that it was a negative thing. It's had its frustrating moments, but that's where you got to sort of go, well, at least people are interested, or, you know, I mean, and it's a huge part of my story. So yeah, I mean, I think it's now it's interesting just to sort of see my mum and my dad have a band together, the Pajama Club, and now my mum's experiencing what it's like to do interviews and be asked about things, and she's kind of got a sort of newfound respect for it, I suppose. And also Dad's, you know, getting asked questions about me now and stuff like that, and that excites him. So it'd be weird if it might have upset me or anything like that. The worst part is that people may think that there is a, you know, or want to give any kind of, not pity, but, you know, a feeling of like, oh, you know, it must be hard, because it's got such great sides to it, and I think it just evens itself out.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense, because I can imagine people also thinking the other, which is, oh, maybe it opens certain doors. And maybe it does, I have no idea.
I think that's the immediate response that certain people would have, and then those that think about it a bit longer, they go, oh, but then there's the expectation and the shadow, that blah, 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 and all these things that actually have never really played on my mind, whether that be because if he really, really annoyed me one day, maybe I'd be like, oh, Dad.
I hope that never happens for his sake.
Yeah, he has his moments. He's a bit annoying sometimes, just when he's trying to crack jokes and stuff.
All right, we got that on record. You know we're taping this, right?
Yeah, so I got my sense of humor from him anyway, so I'm equally as annoying.
Cool. Well, love the music. Best of luck with everything.
Cheers, man.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, cheers.